Good evening. I'd like to call to order the BOE Budget Workshop number 3.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I know it probably feels like you just saw me. Time goes quickly. So since our last meeting, we've been working to address any questions that came in, and also dealing with some new information that came in that you'll learn about tonight as well. That is something we'll have to consider in your deliberations. The goal for tonight, as the third and final planned Board of Ed budget workshop, is to, hopefully hear any additional questions, gain a better understanding of any outlying concerns or thoughts you might have on the budget as proposed by me, and then ask any questions, and then hopefully the goal at the end of the night is to have a straw poll vote just to see where board members are in preparation for this isn't the official vote, it's just to try to hopefully by the end of the night, if we answered all your questions, is to try to gauge where you stand as far as going into the Board of Ed meeting on February 14th. We do have some time before then to think about things. So if you're unable to do that tonight, there are options as well. So with that being said, welcome. We'll go to the next slide, Kevin. So tonight's agenda is based on the Q&A once again, among some other information. As I said, new information had come in. Unfortunately, unfavorable information came in the very next day about health insurance after I presented to you. On Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we received notification, as you'll see on another slide, about health insurance. I'll go through that. We'll talk about the questions and answers that came in since the last time we met. I did give you all a packet that represents answers to the questions. We'll go through that. Board discussion about what do you need to support this budget as currently revised, and where are we in the process. We'll just give an overview of where tonight stands in the overall process of the budget preparation. And then, as I said, straw poll on Board of Ed budget. The formal vote is on the 14th. I threw a little Valentine's Day heart in there. But basically that's the goal. We just want to make sure that we have addressed any outlying issues, concerns, thoughts, so that the board members have an idea of where you stand with respect to my proposed budget and what the Board of Education budget vote may look like. We'll go to the next page, Kevin. So, as I just alluded to or mentioned, we work in cooperation with the town for health insurance and budget the same number because we have the same insurance plan, the state partnership plan that we switched over to a few years ago. The rates that we are that we use in our budget calculations are given to us, I guess, sort of informally through the best. It's really a best guess at the time from the brokers that the town works with, based on the history and how things are going. As I mentioned and shared in the last presentation, the state comptroller sent a notification to towns and to town business managers, finance managers, and about favorable numbers, $40 million of COVID relief funds being put into the state partnership fund to give that some more funding, higher level of funding and security. That coupled with low experiences, and we were told, based on a conversation with the town finance manager, Mr. Adlerstein, and I, that all of those things considered, it looked like a safe number would be 3%. That's what I brought to you on Tuesday, which represented a $174,000 plus reduction in what I had given with the 6% initially on last Thursday night. Initially, we were told to use 6%, and the town was using 6% as well. So things have changed since then. On yesterday morning, we received, as I said, an email from a letter came out from the state, and then from the broker saying what it says on this slide in front of you. estimating a rate increase of 8% over 2021-22, rather than the 3% that we were hoping for. This is obviously still subject to change. There are many things that will, continue to be looked at before the official rate is set. We won't have that. Last year we found out, I think it was February 9th, the state sent out a formal notification. We heard about it later on after the board had voted for your budget. I'm not sure what the timing will be this time, so I'm just giving you all the information I have at this time. So Kevin, unless you want to add anything to that?
No, I asked our broker when we would have more information, and probably not until April. Like that what we got yesterday is the preliminary notification.
Thank you, Sam. So the preliminary notification came last year on February 9th. It came out earlier this year. That's what we received yesterday. So there won't be any additional notification until probably close to April. All right. Thank you, Sam. So on the next slide, you'll see some numbers that have changed. Our original 6% health insurance budget, that includes 6% health insurance, I should say, was a 3.43% increase. As I mentioned at the last meeting, based on, which is now, unfortunately not accurate, assumption about health insurance rates. We had dropped it by 174,433. Tonight, with the 8% recommended to adjust for health insurance, it adds $290,721. So with that all considered and factored into the budget, it brings it up to a $41,308,794 budget, which is a 3.72% increase at the 8% level over last year. I will note that all the items in the budget, all the pages in the budget book, other than health insurance, represent a 2.55% increase. So the insurance is a 1.17% of our total 3.72% increase. So that's something important to note. 2.55% is a very aggressive number for all the things that are in our budget, especially when you saw that our contracts that we're obligated to pay for salaries and staffing are over 3% in themselves. So we'll go on to the next slide. This is what that looks like broken down, as I just talked about it before it was on the screen. But last year's adopted budget, $39,826,972. The budget this year before health insurance increases, $40,843,643, a dollar increase of $1,016,671. That represents a 2.55% increase without the insurance. The health insurance cost is $465,154, as we were told to calculate it at this point. That's a percentage increase of 3.72% over last year's budget, for a total budget of $41,308,797. Sam, go ahead.
You'll notice this is labeled BOE budget, and I don't want you to think we're getting ahead of ourselves. We just took the format from last year to show how or not last year, it was actually a few years ago, where insurance was also a significant issue, and so this is the format we use, splitting it out. At the top says recommendation BOE budget, so just want to not have you think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Thank you, Sam. On the next slide, I did some research. HASA, or Hartford Area Superintendents Association, sent out a request for superintendent's proposed budgets in our area. Some of them didn't come back yet, but these are the ones that have come back so far. It gives you an idea of where districts are standing, and I will note that the districts, such as New Britain, Vernon, East Hartford, that are really low, Enfield, even Enfield and Bristol, received substantial title funds, Alliance District funding, and other grants through title grants, and also enormous amounts of ESSER funding. You know, I think Sam did an analysis of the ESSER grants that went out, and there were, Sam, do you remember the numbers on that?
Yeah, the top 10 districts got 53% of the whole pot of ESSER money. So between 10 districts,
Some districts received about $100 million in ESSER grants. It was, you know, so that just gives you an idea of, so when you see some really low numbers, there's a reason for that. You know, but districts that received less, or districts that are more similar to us, you see some of them, you know, listed here. You know, Cromwell 3.81, and East Windsor 4.1, Newington 4.81, Ellington 4.24, Southington next door is 4.12, Somers 5.76, South Windsor 4.95. So, you know, those are just some examples of where they came in. Cheshire isn't on here, but I talked to that superintendent. They have to come in at 5.4 because of a significant health insurance issue. So they're trying to make up for that. So it just gives you an idea of kind of where I'm proposing compared to what other districts are at. On the next slide, and we'll do questions and everything at the end if that's okay. I'll just, as you can see, this slide shows only, I think, 13 slides. Just a few questions came in since the last meeting. There was one that came in later today after everything was copied, so I apologize for the extra kind of page that's not in order that you'll see in the slideshow. Again, thanks to Sam for helping put this together. The Board of Education questions received since Tuesday. The first one is, what were the actual 2018-19 expenses for objects 5302 and 5501? 5302 is district postage. I know Mrs. Clark had asked about that. The actual expenditures are listed there for 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20. So 24,594, 15,468, and 27,812 respectively, compared to the current request of $19,100. Sam, I'm not sure about the dip in the middle there, but I don't know if you have any information about that, or if it was budgeted too low and then we realized it the next year and, you know, had to use from another line and then corrected it. I'm not sure what might have happened with the.
no, I don't offhand, no.
Yeah, they might have just, okay. Object 5501 includes majority of our community relations activities under Lynn Davis, and that shows the actual expenditures from those 3 years, which included 14,475, 23,580, and then 22,556 respectively, compared to the current request of 29,653. The difference between 17-18 and 18-19 included some consolidation from other accounts. Our community relations activities have increased over these years, and justification for an amount higher than 29,653 was provided but reduced during the process. So there's more than that requested, and it was reduced back to 29,653. But we believe that's a good number for what is needed for that department. We're doing a lot with college and career pathways. We're doing a lot with field work, you know, field work placements. All the things that Lynn does and Sue Bradley, and so there's a lot that goes into that account. Number two is there a fuel adjustment allowance change clause in the DATCO contract that permits them to pass on additional fuel costs if costs rise past a stated limit? And the answer to that is no, there's no such clause. The purchase of fuel for buses is outside of the DATCO contract at the rate that we lock in through the partnership with the town fuel contracting. So Sam mentioned that at the last meeting. We had a very favorable fuel purchasing experience last year. This year, we still had a decent price considering how high fuel costs are, but compared to last year's costs, it's not a great price. Last year was a really unbelievable deal. So we went up in the bus fuel line, but the answer to that question is it's not within the contract, so there's no clause. It's separate, and we provide the fuel. And then the last question that was on this page is what's included under line item 8, dues and fees. They include the following estimated accounts: ice hockey program. So we have a co-op where we participate with other schools and have a co-op team that's been very successful and very popular. CABES, Connecticut Association of Boards of Education fees. Care Solace is a program to support families, staff, and students who are having mental health needs and are trying to find services that align with their needs. I've shared that when we had the student loss over the summer, and then in more recent times, shared that out to families. It's a relatively low-cost program. CIAC, Connecticut Interscholastic Athletics Conference, and then CCC. CCC is our Central Connecticut Conference within CIAC. That's our local conference that Plainville's in, plus tournament fees, competition fees, robotics and similar club fees, facility license fees for things like the boilers. There's license fees, NIAC accreditation for our preschool programs, support organizations like CREC and CASBO, and there's a school counseling organization, and a number of others, but that's what dues and fees represents. The last slide that I gave you that was separate from the packet, this was a question that came in later and didn't make it into the slideshow, but you have it. It's Board of Education questions, continued. So this was what makes up the overall 8.85% teacher salary increase over the last 3 years. I think everybody should have that. Looks like this. Well, you see it up there. Contract spans 3 years, so it's negotiated in the year before the contract expires, so we're going to have to negotiate again next fall for the following year, because this contract ends on June 30th of 2023. Negotiated increases amounted to a total of 8.85% over 3 years. It was broken down. There were things factored in like step increases and whatnot in the total cost, but it was broken down to 2.62 the first year, 2.83% the second year, which is now, and 3.4% for next year. So next year is based on the 3-year contract. It's the highest increase of the 3 years within that 8.85 overall. Those increases are apportioned based on a salary schedule that takes into account advanced degrees and longevity. Teachers and the board come to a negotiated salary. Town council chair sits in on those negotiations as well. That's every 3 years. Both financial and non-financial terms are negotiated. The board forms a negotiating committee. I'm sorry, I just said what that says there. And the parties, if the parties are not able to agree, we are part of the municipal and school employees in Connecticut have a binding arbitration under state's municipal MERA, Municipal Employee Relations Act of 1975, and the Teacher Negotiation Act, TNA, of 1979. Municipalities and school districts in Connecticut settle labor impasses where there's a disagreement and they can't come to an agreement using a form of arbitration called last best offer, issue by issue, binding arbitration. Strikes are illegal. So teachers can't strike, but they have the right to binding arbitration. So arbitration is both compulsory and binding, meaning that the school board and union must submit to arbitration when negotiations break down, and the results of the arbitration must be followed by both parties. So, I know sometimes it seems like an easy thing to do, even if it's not the right thing to do. Just don't give a certain amount of raise, but there's a lot that goes into that decision, and it's based on comparable teacher salaries and raises and increases across the state that are analyzed throughout that bargaining process. So if a district said, well, we're only going to give 6% over 3 years, and all the other districts are in the 8, 9, 9%, then it's highly likely that the teachers union would win an arbitration, and all the legal fees must be paid by the board, and it's an expensive and unpleasant process. So ultimately, we want to make sure that our teachers feel valued, because they are, and very talented, and we want them to feel valued and supported at a reasonable salary increase, and that's what negotiations are all about. So there's a little bit of a flow chart there that Sam put in for you. If you want to look at that, that's kind of the process for negotiations and bargaining. So that's the long story of how really all contracts are negotiated, not just the teachers. It's teachers, it's paras and tutors, it's custodians, it's office professionals, custodians and maintainers, and office professionals. Okay? The next slide just gives you the historical questions that were asked on leading up to Tuesday night. Since, from Thursday to Tuesday, the 125 workshop, we addressed all of those questions. Tonight, we just addressed the questions that are listed there, plus the teacher salary question. We plan to open the Q&A to residents, as we did last year. So anyone in the community, residents who wish to to field questions through the process. We'll be able to do that. Any additional Q&A will be reported prior to or at the regular board meeting on the 14th. Ideally, it would be good to give you information about what questions came in advance if we can, but it'll happen on or before the 14th. Kevin, if you wouldn't mind, for the next slide. So, where are we in the process? This is just an overview, and this is the I guess cheat sheet, if you will, that Sam said he likes to use when looking at, when we look at mill rate calculations and how expenditures must equal revenues in a budget and where the Board of Education budget fits in. We're line 2 on this budget. This is from last year, or the current year. The Board of Ed approves its budget at the February meeting, so we have about 2 weeks and a few days before that. The town manager then considers the Board of Ed budget in relation to all items 1 through 9 on this balance sheet, if you will, and proposes his budget to the town council. Our indication at this point is that he would include this Board of Ed budget as a part of his town manager budget proposal to the town council, so part of his proposal. The town council evaluates and deliberates, including taking input from residents. Town council proposed a budget to the residents, which would be voted at the all-day April 26th budget vote. So takeaway, the board approves a budget that can move us forward in the process. It's then assessed as a component of the general fund but balanced budget that ultimately goes to the referendum. And yes, I'm pretty much reading every word on every page today. So, I didn't read the whole balance sheet for you, though. I apologize.
You're doing fine.
It's been a long week already. All right, so I will.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, you can, Becky.
So
Absolutely.
what happened a few years ago was the budgets were split off. I don't know if you mentioned that. So when folks go to vote, they're voting for the town budget and the Board of Education budget separately.
Correct.
Which is, a little more problematic for us. And so that, that is just something that did happen to help add to the division.
Yes, thank you, Becky. I know that happened when I was here in Plainville. It happened fairly early in my tenure, 12 years ago, let's see. So it's probably about 10 years ago that happened where the budgets were split and voted on separately. This next slide just gives you a timeline of what's happened so far. Look at how much you've done already. And this is the formal process. As you know, we start in the summer with all of our budget deliberations as an administrative team, working with our staff. Here we are on January 27th, and February 1st is the date for the workshop, right, Sam, with CABE? We're asking you to hold that with Nick Caruso from CABE about this board operating, and Sam, you want to, well, we can probably talk about that another time, but you can see the next meeting after that's the Board of Education budget vote here in the cafeteria at the high school. And then the series of meetings that happen with town manager and the town council and public session, public comment on the vote and all the other processes that lead up to the all-day budget vote at the firehouse on the 26th of April. And I think that's all. We just have the Q&A form that we're going to open up to the community. We'll share some of our budget artifacts as well for them to review. And I think that's all we have. Sam or Dave, did you want to share anything else? So with all of that new information and unfortunate health insurance information, that is my proposed budget, the superintendent's proposed budget, unfortunately, at 3.72%. And the board has the right to, or the option to, adopt that budget as it stands, or to recommend it decreased, or to recommend it increased. So those are really the three options that the board has. And if there's any other questions or clarifications you'd like now, we can definitely do our best to answer those here or get those answers to you shortly if we don't have all the details right in front of us. And I'll stop talking, and any questions at all from board members or thoughts?
Anyone have questions?
I have a question. I'm just trying, I'm going to the page. Thank you. Let me get it here. Custodians. Under 1120, custodians and maintainers,
Yep.
just in reviewing for my education, so it looks like we lost the lead custodian in retirement, or the supervisor in retirement, and replaced with the lead custodian. And we went, am I reading this correctly, that we went from 21 down to 18, including the retirement from the supervisor to the lead? I guess I was just curious as to if there was a reduction in FTEs,
Yeah.
why there was the increase, and does that go back to the salary and benefits?
Yeah, Sam can probably explain that better than I can. The supervisor left the district, and we opted not to refill that same position. And we did hire a lead custodian, who's someone already in the district, and so is a stipend basically added to their salary. Sam, do you want to share any more about?
Yeah, I think the confusing part is that facilities supervisor was a non-bargaining position. So that position that was reduced is not on this page, it's on page 1199. And that's why it looks like this went up, but it's offset by a reduction on 1199.
They're not, that position was not part of the custodian maintainer contract. It was, so non-bargaining positions don't belong to a bargaining group, because when you're a supervisor of others, you're not part of that, like, you're not part of the bargaining group. So I'm not part of the administrator's bargaining group. I'm on an island all by myself. So that's kind of how that works, but, yeah, so 1199 went down. That's where that position was, and, yeah. I don't know if that explains it, Sam.
I'm going to say something for transparency. I'm going to say something that's going to be confusing. But there was a PFRN employee who we did not include in our head count, but is 100% paid for by a grant. And so to be consistent with the way we treat everybody else, I put that employee into 1199 and then offset that employee. So that's why you don't see a reduction of one in 1199. There was an employee that we had before, hadn't reported it because of 100% grant reported, but that's not how we do it. We put them in and then we offset them out. And so I made that employee consistent with all of our other employees that are grant funded. And that's why you don't see one person being reduced on 1199. Sorry for a confusing explanation, but had to do it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so the superintendent has put forth a budget of 3.72%, which is an increase of $1,016,671 and $465,154, which is a total, and the increase included to the health insurance, for a total of $41,308,797. May I have a consensus to vote on this evening's budget? We'll start with Rachel.
I'm not ready to vote on the budget. I would still like more time, please. No.
We're just taking a consensus.
No.
Okay.
Can-
Is Ms. Clark on the phone? Do we have anyone on the phone?
No, not tonight.
No,
I
okay.
mean, just kind of, do you
Mr.
mind just
Elderstein.
point of process?
Yeah.
You know, and whether you go around the room or not, I think just for the board's benefit, it would be good if folks aren't ready to support this budget, it comes out now and reasons come out now, so you have time to think it through, because
Okay.
if you get to your regular meeting on the 14th without having already had that conversation, it could be a very challenging meeting. And I think by statute, you only have a few days after that to actually officially pass your budget. I don't know what the date is, but you really start ending up with your back against the wall. There is a requirement to pass that budget by sometime mid-February.
Okay.
That's why it's important tonight to kind of put it on the table if folks have issues, or, you know, even just a degree you're uncertain or the area you're uncertain on. Nobody wants to put anybody on the spot, but it's really to the benefit of the whole board to do that kind of thinking tonight.
Okay.
Right, and, you know, just to wrap up my budget, because I didn't give my kind of, closing remarks, I guess, as if you haven't heard enough remarks from me, but, you know, we labor on the budget extensively. We put a lot of thought into it, a lot of time and a lot of effort to make sure that we're providing the very best budget we can so that this Board of Education has an easier decision. We don't want to make it harder than it already is. I know it's a difficult decision, and it's tough to gain 100% consensus, but, you know, we've really worked hard to make sure that we're putting in what we believe that we need in order to operate our existing programs and have the staff that we need to run those programs and the energy and all the other resources that runs a school district. You know, we're proud of the work we do in Plainville schools. You know, you saw a lot of pictures and some slides, and you're hearing from the schools presenting, and there's going to be a lot more great things to celebrate as we go forward with our strategic planning process. And we had our administrative summit earlier tonight, and pretty excited about the work ahead, using both the operating budget and, you know, combined with grant funding that we're going to really use in a meaningful way. So I guess I'll just close with saying that, you know, I fully support the budget as being a really strong budget. It's really unfortunate about the health insurance. So I apologize for taking you on a roller coaster ride with that. You know, it was outside of my control, but, you know, I guess in hindsight, you know, if it seemed too good to be true, then I guess I shouldn't have shared it on Tuesday. But it's one of those things that, you know, we thought it was going to be okay to go 3, and then Sam's going to try to bail me out here.
No, well, it's the business managers have a listserv where we all share, and basically, it's not just this district. Every district that's in the partnership plan went on that roller coaster ride, because a number of us, based on the early advice, put in a lower number. And it's hard, once you do that, to then have to put in a higher number, so. My email is blowing up today from all the districts that are in the partnership plan. They're in the same boat as Mr. LePage.
Thanks, Sam. See, I told you you'd bail me out.
It's not easy,
It isn't easy, and it's
bailing him out.
It's so, you know, that being said, a 2.55% increase on all the items outside of insurance, I feel it's an aggressive budget. You know, we do incur some risks in there, but we believe that we're in a good spot to hopefully endure those risks and challenges that we'll have. We are using ESSER grants in a number of ways to help, you know, keep any new spending on things that we want to do for the district, and new programs and exciting new opportunities for kids. We're using a lot of those grants for those purposes, among others. So, Sam, go ahead.
So I think it's just, while we're on the topic of insurance, it's also worth mentioning that, not to get lost in this discussion, the Connecticut Partnership Plan that we moved from being self-insured a few years ago to the Connecticut Partnership Plan, turns out to have been a very good move for us. So even with this increase, it's still very, very favorable to where we would have been if we were self-insured to this day. So just when we just look at the cost of a one-year increase, we might miss that. So I just wanted to make sure folks are aware.
Thank you, Sam. I'm
Did
really
we-
done now, I promise.
Are we taking any questions from the town, like people, or no? Like, I thought that's what you said. I'm sorry. I might have just misunderstood. You
What
said
we,
ab-
what we've done in the past is, Mr. LePage sends an email, part of his normal correspondence with residents in the community, and invite them into, you know, basically through the same process that's at the end of your report. He'll invite folks to write in their comments, but, I mean, as chair, you can do anything you want.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if we were supposed to, if you had people online.
No,
Do we have anyone online this evening?
not that I'm aware of. Kevin?
Okay,
Not in these, yeah, these are,
okay,
yeah. But we'll give everyone in the community, I'll send it out. I'll send out an overview of the budget, some explanations. I probably won't send them the entire, you know, it's just too much to process without a lot of talking through all the points, but I'll send an overview, and town members can send in questions that they have about the budget. We'll do our best to answer those and let the board know about those as well.
and we'll address those at the February 14th meeting, those questions, like, from community?
Yeah,
If there was some significant questions that might sway your thinking, we would share that in advance.
I
Like,
see.
we wouldn't want to, we'll work to make sure there's no surprises on February 14th.
Right. Some of them will just be maybe just minor informational questions that, you know, what does this mean, or, you know, things like that. That wouldn't be really important for the board to consider, more informational clarifications, but if it's, you know, if it's something that would, like Sam said, could possibly sway your thoughts on it, definitely.
Okay.
And you can access all of those, we can share everything.
I have another question, please. Throughout the budget, it says, subject to negotiations, and just, again, for my education, it looks like negotiations are after budget. So do we have funds on reserve for the variation if the negotiations go up and we didn't allocate that? Am I making sense?
Well, if you're talking about the contract negotiations.
Contract negotiations,
We have
right.
office professionals and custodians, and they're two of our smaller groups.
Okay, so it's not
So you
that
can
large
see
of a
their
variation.
increases, we budgeted 2% as a placeholder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if some of them are watching, you know, we haven't decided what it's going to be yet. That goes through negotiations, but it's just kind of a placeholder where it's been in the past, but things have trended upward a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect it'll probably be likely
Okay,
at least that, if not higher, but the change that would have on the budget, no, we didn't budget for over 2% is the short answer.
okay.
We budgeted 2%, and if it ends up being more than that, we'd have to absorb that cost through another budget line that we wouldn't be able to use fully.
Okay, that was the actual question. So
Yeah.
if it did go beyond the 2%, where would it come from? What does that look like? Like, would that come from ESSER money? Would that come from grant? Or do you have, you just pull it from another line item, and you can pull from whatever line item you need for whatever you need?
We can transfer from one account to another in certain situations. Sam's better at that explanation as the business manager, but
The difference that I would expect from that would be within the range of our normal variations, you know, and for the big example this year is that outplacement line. Like, we often will encounter something unexpected, you know, and as a matter of fact, 100% of the time we'll encounter something unexpected. And so we are always trying to, we manage our budget, you know, we manage the risks in our budget, we track the opportunities wherever something doesn't happen that's favorable, that we can use to offset with the unfavorable. And in the portfolio, we know we have to come back to zero. Since I've been here, I think about half the years, we've had a budget freeze. So we've stopped spending in the middle of the year. And when things we would have done that this year if it hadn't been for our ESSER grant, you know, because of that outplacement and some other issues. And that's just the normal way we run the district.
right, we try not to do budget freezes. We want our our administrators and our staff to budget for what they need and then be able to spend what they budget for. But if something like Sam mentioned, unexpected comes up that's a significant expense that we're not able to recoup through unanticipated savings in another area, so maybe we purchase something that we anticipated would cost, X amount, but it's less than that. So there's a lot of little variations within the budget that add up over time. So sometimes they can be favorable, other times unfavorable. So Sam watches that really closely throughout the year. And we've tried since I've been superintendent, we haven't had a budget freeze, but, we've also had ESSER as kind of, as a backup in case, so we're able to use that to offset some things. We don't want to use it to supplant, as I've mentioned, too heavily, because then you set ourselves up for the fiscal cliff even more than we're going to be dealing with. There'll be some fiscal cliff inevitably, but.
These are great questions, by the way. I think this is the kind of thing you want to discuss tonight. Anything that's on your mind is fair game.
But didn't you say that if we get to this fiscal cliff, that can possibly be not a good thing?
What was that, Larry? I'm sorry.
Didn't you say that if we get to the point of the fiscal cliff, that it could affect us negatively, financially?
Yes, if we're not smart about how we use grant funds, and if we over supplant items that are normally in our budget year to year that we must budget for, and say, well, we'll take that out and we'll use grant funds to cover it this year, it has to come back into the budget. So the more of that you do, the greater the risk you have for that fiscal cliff. Sam showed that slide that had over $1 million of supplanted, expenses. So you have to be really careful with that, because eventually, you're going to need to budget for, whatever it is, whatever account it is. These are all in here for a reason. So if we're taking it out and using grant funds that are going to go away, it's going to come back, and then when it comes back, it's going to be compounded with all the contract increases that you have. We're renegotiating the teacher's contract in the fall. Interest rates are really high right now, and that's expected to continue for some time. That also impacts contract negotiations and purchasing power. So there's a lot that, if you combine that with offsetting your normal budget with too many grants, we would be setting ourselves up for a pretty big problem in 24, 25. Is fiscal year 25 budget or 50?
23, 24?
20
No, 24,
26.
25.
26 is when
So, yeah,
Oh,
25, 26
25,
budget
26,
year would be
okay.
a real challenge. We'll have grants through September 30th of 2024. We have to use the grants by. They may extend that, but, so it's in there, as you saw, there was the coronavirus relief fund that's already expended. It had to be expended. That was really to get us through, to get what we needed those first 3 months in helping to prepare for reopening schools. ESSER 1 came out more for needs for reopening schools and keeping them open safely than ESSER 2. So they're tiered in for different reasons, similar reasons, but different reasons. And then ESSER 3, ARPA, is really for, the word they use is to transform education. So that's what the strategic planning process will be looking at, ways that we can really have some transformative practices that, new and different ways that we can help kids to be engaged and access learning and positive life outcomes. So that's what that process will be about, using the additional funds we have coming that we're not approved for them yet, but we're certain we will be, with Sam's excellent grant writing skills.
And are those funds that we have to accept if we're not approved for them yet? Is that something that we are required to accept?
We're okay. The only reason we haven't done it is just because it creates rework. And ESSER 2 is intertwined with ESSER 3. If we went back and redid ESSER 2 now, we really should look at ESSER 3 and do them both at the same time. But then we're going to have the strategic planning exercise with the community, which would then have us go back and rewrite them again. So we just left it and decided we would do it all at once. And we're not at risk of losing anything. Maybe I misunderstood the question.
So I think you asked if we're required to accept the grants?
No.
No, we don't have to accept, you don't have to accept a grant, but if you don't, then you have to find funding for all the things that grants would cover from operating budget. Right?
Are there stipulations to accepting the grants?
There are conditions and requirements for use. You can't, there's limitations on what you can use it for, and there's reporting requirements and stipulations. You have to report accurately on what you use them for. But as far as conditions or required uses, no, there are certain things that are allowable, but we're not told what we have to use it for. They're just a kind of a general guideline. It's pretty wide open as far as what we can use most of it for. I don't know if I answered your question. Is there?
No, you have. I just didn't know if it was conditional in any way, if we needed to commit to anything in order to receive the funds. Any actions if our, is it, for example, are they required to remain masked for us to receive these funds, just as an example?
They don't, no, there's no mention of that.
Okay.
The masking comes from the governor and the DPH.
So it's not connected in any way, so it's not conditional?
No.
Okay. Is there any philanthropy money that's coming in with these grants that we know of?
No, they're federally funded grants. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if
Okay.
I'm misunderstanding.
And I'm trying to think of a scenario where we wouldn't want to accept the money, and I struggle to come up with that. I guess it would be if we felt like we had everything covered in our community and we really didn't have a need for it. And we don't believe that's the case. We believe we really can put this to good use and really do some transformational work. And so I don't see any downside to accepting it. The requirements are just that we spend it in the ways that we're allowed to and that we say we're going to. That's the biggest requirement.
Yeah, I think if we took that grant money away, the percentage increase that you would see now would be double or triple because of all the supplies, everything we had to purchase through some of the grants that we've already purchased.
Yeah, we're still buying remedial type things to keep our schools running. We're still in that mode.
Any other questions? We'll move on then. Ms. Clark isn't here. Mrs. Hardy? We're taking the consensus vote?
I don't know, I think I need some more time to go through this, so I'm going to go with
Okay. Okay, Mrs. Martinez?
So Mrs. Kuntzelb, are you asking if, so you're looking to know if they want to accept the proposed budget or lower or higher, raise it or lower it? Is that?
I'm just trying to get an idea with the consensus vote right now, and I wanted people to ask questions. If you had questions that are going to, if you have any questions right now that are going to help you make your consensus vote, I would prefer that people would ask them now. If there's anything that they don't know, if you just need extra time, that's great, that's fine. But for the people that do know tonight, I'd like to get a consensus.
I'm adding this up, and I could be wrong, but it looks like it's a 10.55% increase overall on this budget. Am I not figuring this right, or is that right? That's including insurance. Well, with insurance,
Can you put your mic on?
I'm wondering what the overall percentage rate increase is, including everything.
3.72. Yeah, the insurance, the $465,154 represents 1.17% of the budget. So when you combine that with the 2.55 for everything else other than insurance, it adds up to 3.72. What you see, what's confusing there, and I understand, is the 8%, that's the 8% increase in the health insurance line from what we spent on health insurance last year, not on the whole budget, so, yeah. So it's just, 2.55% is that's it's $1,016,671, represents 2.55% increase over last year's budget. And then the additional $465,154 for insurance represents another 1.17%, so the total adds up to 3.72. Okay.
So, can I ask a question, or point of clarification? Kevin, we're being recorded, we're on YouTube something, yes? So when people speak, you need to turn on your microphones so that people can hear, because I couldn't even hear what you said, Deb, but certainly people listening couldn't hear, okay? So just, be mindful of that. And, I understand people might still have questions, but to be honest, we've had this budget now for a while, and this is our last scheduled budget meeting. So this is really when we need to be asking questions, because by the time we walk out of here today, we need to know if we have a majority of people supporting or not, and where people are. So at this point in time, with the amount of time that we've had with this budget, the amount of questions that we've asked, we should all be able to give our opinion about whether or not we feel we can support it or not, or what direction we would want to go in. And that way, if we need to have another meeting between now and February 14th, then we need to have another meeting. But that's how the decision should be made, and that's how we work. And Deb, we've done this many years, and that's the process that we follow, correct? Okay.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Is that good? Okay. So, my thoughts are, I'm definitely more cautious walking in tonight and hearing about that insurance. As, we're budgeting for 8%, but if it went to 12%, that would really be like 4%, right? So we're budgeting at 3.72, but if our insurance were to go up to what you're thinking it could be, to the 12%, we could be really under budgeting. And we do have a lot of line items that are flatlined. So I think the minimum we can do is what was presented to us. And we've passed on the board level. We've been able to pass what was presented to us the last 2 years, and it was still able to result in a 0% increase when the town was finished with it. Luckily for the federal grants, I'm not really seeing any extras in here. I would, at some point, I do want to go back to this, like some of the questions you were asking, Lori, I thought were great about, foreign languages, and there are a lot of things that other towns are doing that Plainville isn't doing right now, with the kids, and, there are more things we could be doing. But at the minimum, I strongly think we should stay with the recommendation, because this budget is definitely without risks, and it is a necessity budget. There's not fluff in here that I could find, or extra programming, or extra. And I know I've spent multiple hours going through this line by line. So, it is nice to hear from people where they stand, and if there's a problem with the budget, to hear, where the problem is, so we can come together, as a board and work it out.
So your
I would say
consensus
minimum.
vote is,
I would say at the minimum as presented, but I would vote in favor,
yes, okay.
yes.
Ms. Peterson? your consensus vote?
I just think it's a little too high, but I'm sure I'll be outvoted.
So I have a question. Should the insurance come back where it's raised? And we're being told to allot for 8% of this increase. And say the insurance comes back at 6% increase or 4% increase. What is the board going to do with that money? It's going to go back to the town council?
No, the board budget would, if it's voted on with the 8% increase in there, we won't know the rates to be different than that until after the board budget's been adopted.
Right, but
Once
I'm
it's-
just
once it-
saying.
Once it's adopted, that's your budget, and then it goes to the town council. So the town council would make a determination if the rates come in lower, so they come in at 6%, then
Mm-hmm.
they would simply remove the extra funding from our budget that is not needed to cover the health insurance because the rate came in lower. So it wouldn't impact what we,
Right.
it wouldn't impact what we're receiving for all the other items. It would just be reducing the health insurance to reflect the change in the price of health insurance. So that's how that would work. If I explained
Correct.
that well, I don't know.
So basically, so with the budget that you're presenting this evening, should the insurance increase, it will not affect, we're only going to take what it goes up as. So, like I said, if it comes in at 7, if it comes in at 6, the town council's going to know that by then. They will lower it to reflect that.
Right, so basically, the amount that we need to cover our budget would decrease by the amount of the health insurance decrease, so that's all that they would put into their town manager's budget, into the town council budget. So that would be up to the town council to, like last year, that happened, the very same thing happened. We budgeted 7% minus the 2.5% regional discount, which is no longer optional. The last 2 years, there was a 2.5% Hartford County regional discount for insurance, but that's gone away. So now whatever the rate is, the rate is. But, so that brought us down to 4.5%, which is what, if my memory is correct, which is what we budgeted. And then the Board of Ed voted on that budget with a 4.5% increase. Excuse me if my number is wrong, but the following day, the new rate, the actual rate came in from the insurance, from the state, and then from the insurance brokers. And we ended up having a 1% increase in the budget. So that 3.5% difference was just reduced. I think it was $202,000 that the council decreased our budget by that amount, but it didn't impact what we asked for because we're still getting the same health insurance, it just cost us less, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay?
So I guess my whole point is that if you came in this evening saying, oh my gosh, we didn't plan for this, we didn't know this was going to happen, okay, it puts it up, but it doesn't necessarily put it up because it may not be what it is. So regardless of what we as a board approve, it's not necessarily going to be that because of the fact that it's going to change come April. And then the town council will reduce it to possibly reflect what it is anyway, correct? Like what we originally anticipated.
You're voting on a budget with the best information you have at this time.
Exactly.
And then the town council will take new information at that time and have to make adjustments accordingly. But ultimately, as long as the board is not reducing the lines other than health insurance in this budget, it'll be up to the town council, obviously, to consider the budget, and we'll have our time, with town council, and they'll decide what to do with our budget. But the health insurance is outside of all of our control right now. It's just something we're being told is, that's how much we should budget for at this point. See?
And I'd
Yeah.
also like to remind the board that 1.768, if not more, $1 million was returned by the Board of Education to the town. I just feel that it's a very conservative budget as well. There is no fluff in here. And if anybody can find some, I would like to hear what it is, because I think that we need to discuss this as a group, as a team, and we need to remember that a lot of money has come back to the town, so just please consider that as well.
Yeah, could I just talk about the process just for a minute? Because I think you bring up some very good points, and not all of us have been all through this process before. So the page that says, where are we in this process, is pretty important because it lays out the whole balanced budget, of which we're line 2, we're one line. And one thing we know is through the course of that process, as the council deliberates and tries to balance and come up with a balanced budget, putting all of this together in a way that makes most sense for the community, something's going to change. You know, whether it's the health insurance assumption or new information comes in, or, you know, it's a sizable job to come up with a balanced budget that makes sense for the community. And every town does it a little differently. Some towns don't have as cooperative a working relationship as Plainville does. And the way the law is written is the council can tell the board how much they can spend. They can reduce the budget. They can't tell them where to take it from. And some towns, like, that's kind of the way they work. And they just, you know, it's kind of like throw it over the wall. And in Plainville, it's never been like that. Plainville, it's been pretty cooperative, and Mr. LePage is a partner in helping work through the rest of the process to come up with the right budget toward referendum. So as assumptions change, it might be something to do with capital that gets discussed, or, you know, the discussion doesn't end on February 14th.
And if there was anything extra that happened, or say if something happened, Steve could go to the town and say, we had this urgent thing happen. You know, I think that it is conservative, and it could be higher. I mean, look at our neighboring towns.
Can I ask a very fundamental question? Like, I'm going to ask this question from the most basic perspective. Like, I've never seen a budget before in my life. If we have grant fund money, you know, when we say we'll use this, if we can't do this, we can do this, and I understand, of course, it's nice to have extra money. It just might not. I'll save that for another day. Why would we have an increase if there is other money? You see what I'm saying? Why couldn't it zero out? Is that because it can't be used in those certain areas? Like, why would there have to be an increase at all if we have all this extra money? Does that make sense?
I know what you're asking.
Like, very fundamentally, I just want to make sure, because
Yeah.
is it because we can't use the grant ESSER money for the things that we're having the increase in, such as health insurance?
Well, isn't a lot of our ESSER grant stuff like temporary, like it's only for a certain amount of time? So
Right.
once those ESSER grants are spent, that budget, 2025 to 2026 would just skyrocket if we wanted to keep those programming or those staff members. Do you know what I mean?
I
Your
do.
budget this year would be low, but it would just skyrocket, like
So-
all of a sudden.
Right, and I completely get that. You guys have done an excellent job explaining that we would like to use some of this money for big hit items, you know, something where, you know, it's contractual agreements for a few years, you know, so that way we're not planning for something we can't afford or there's no money for. I guess I would just, I see what you're saying where it would be low this year. I guess I'm just trying to understand, I guess fundamentally, why we would need to have an increase at all if we keep saying, well, we'll just use this if we don't have that. And I understand that it could be long-term, but is there any other monies from outside that could be utilized for this increase?
I mean, could I just start with a response? So let's just pretend we don't have ESSER funds, and
Yeah.
we just have IDEA funds and Title I, the grants that we get year over
The
year.
normal ones, yeah.
Those funds come with a warning, don't use this money for things that you're going to rely on year over year, because you're not guaranteed to have this money year over year. Even those ongoing grants come with that warning, and they want to make sure that you're not just relying on those grants. And I would say that's even more of a important caution with this ESSER money, because it really is short-term. Honestly, we probably could rely on that IDA and Title I, Title II, and 3 and 4 money, because, you know, even though it changes year to year, it's fairly consistent. ESSER money is so short-term that if we started using that for our ongoing way of running the district, I think we're going to very quickly get ourselves into big trouble.
And I was
So
just
for
gonna
my,
say,
sorry, for my future education, so grants, that type of money, we wouldn't even apply it to our basic, like if it was a household, our basic everyday items, that would just be extra. So to run the ship with its basic necessities, that money's not applicable.
We are applying grants as offsets on that summaries page. I think it's page 12 or 11. It's in the red. It shows you all the offsets to our salaries. So there's over $2 million in grant offsets
Right,
to the
for
salaries.
short-term positions, right, that are
Some of
contracted
well,
for that.
the ESSER funded, 898,000, I think it was,
Yeah.
are funded through ESSER. Those positions were hired as a durational way to help recover, remediate, get our kids back to speed, because we're having a lot of challenges with that. So that's why they were hired. It's not going to be permanent positions, or some of them, if we want to keep them permanent, we're going to have to decide where to cut elsewhere. But year after year, like Sam said, IDEA and title grants that we get year after year, it's pretty consistent. Generally speaking, you can count on them fairly well. We use those to offset salaries. You can only use them for certain things. So we do use those every year. So that's why you see the offset page. But if you took the total budget increase of, with the insurance is about $1,480,000. If you said, I'm just going to use $1,480,000 of ESSER, we're going to zero out our budget. It's going to catch up and double. We'll be paying. You'll be asking for double what or more. It could be a 7 or 8% budget request. Ultimately you have to pay for all the things that we're taking out of the budget, because they're recurring costs that are in the budget every year. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it's all making complete sense. That's why I'm genuinely trying to
And
understand
No,
it.
they're good questions, and it seems like it makes sense. We have grants just,
And someone also asked a very good question: what is allowable to be charged to an ESSER grant? And so we gave you the list of the allowable expenses, and you can see that there's some flexibility in there. It's not like it says pandemic only and anything else can't be charged. However, if we tried to supplant ongoing expenses in our budget, I think the state would call us on it. I think they would say, hey, wait a minute, you guys can't do that. This is designed for a specific thing. They would probably start going, they'd call up that sheet that's in your budget package that shows all the allowable expenses, and they haven't challenged us on these grants. They did on the first one, the CRF grant.
CRF, yeah.
yep,
They really challenged, that one, they challenged everything. I spent hours and hours defending things that we charged for that grant. And so far, we haven't had that with the ESSER grants, but it's not to say that we wouldn't.
That's pretty, I'm sure this is, a recap for many of you. So I thank you for, I like information, and, I do see that the effort was made to make this very conservative, and I just am someone who, I read and reread and ask, and, so that's just what I'm doing.
Thank you. Yes, Laurie?
Do you find yourself at the end of the year, with spending all of what was in the budget?
Excuse me, can you put I don't mean to interrupt you, but can you put your mic on so that everyone can hear you?
It's on the top. There's a circular.
I was just wondering, if you find yourself with money left over from that year's budget, do you roll that over into the next year, or what do you do with that? Do you find
Can't.
yourself,
No, money that isn't spent would be returned to the town. That's like the last 2 years, the 1.768 million that we didn't spend went back to the town and went back into, you know, where the town council, I don't know if it was a general fund or where, you know, unassigned fund balance. or-
And have you ever found yourself, where you didn't have enough, you didn't ask for enough for the budget? Did you find yourself?
We track that really closely, so that's why we do things like a budget freeze, so we don't allow departments or principals to just purchase the things they had budgeted for. We cut back on things that we were planning to do or purchase in order to make sure that we don't end the year with a deficit, because we don't want to go to the town and say, you know, we didn't plan accordingly and we need more money. So we haven't overspent our budget as long as I've been here. That's what I have Sam for. He watches the numbers really carefully, among other things, of course. Picking on me, things like that. But yes, no, we watch that really carefully, and if it's trending Sam will say, you know, this doesn't look good, you know, we should probably consider a budget freeze. You know, we've done them in the past when I wasn't superintendent, but we've obviously had different situations since I've been in the position, and we've had some grant offsets and school closures and different expenses, and that's why the money was returned. But you know, if we're not careful, then we'll be doing a budget freeze. I've been in districts where they've frozen the budget in November or December because they realized we didn't plan for enough resources, and you know, we have to cut spending, and we'll reassess in, you know, May, and then it looks like, you know, you're going on a spending spree when you realize you do have enough money. So then a lot of purchasing happening toward the end of the year, and we're trying to avoid that. We try to have a plan for what we need, spend when we need it, and don't overspend, don't underspend. Try to find that Goldilocks, just right budget.
So, I know Rachel mentioned, you know, maybe we're used to this, but grants like this, I mean, we're not, because grants like this have never, you know, this is the first time that this kind of situation has occurred. But what you see is everybody trying to, you know, kind of walk that fine line between using the grants and doing it with diligence and for the intention that the grant was put out for, right? But not to supplant or create a big cliff. Now, there's going to be a little cliff. Everybody's going to have a little cliff. And, you know, little cliffs aren't so bad, but big cliffs, you know, we don't want that. So, you know, not only would we not be using the money as intended were we to do that, but we also would be creating a really big problem for ourselves down the road. So that's really what I think. It's kind of like it's just like every district is going to be different, and you got to figure out what can you do. We know that we have to do our strategic planning. And this is a really great opportunity to be able to use some of those funds to do a nice job of strategic planning and be very thoughtful about it, and, you know, maybe move ourselves in a different direction. So it's kind of like making lemonade out of a lemon, you know. And it's not something that we're going to have to do the following year or the following year, you know, so it's a good place to use those funds. So, you know, I think we're constantly looking for things like that we know we have to do, that can make everything, you know, that can improve the school system and yet not make it so we have a bigger issue down the road.
Yeah, you asked the question, is there ever, or maybe it might have been you, Lori, but I think it was about whether you have to take the grants. When the grant announcements came out, and Sam and I looked at it, and Dave, and we saw some districts getting $100 million, right, yeah, or more. Honestly, I said I would not want to be that superintendent, because I don't know how they're going to budget. When you're getting that much money, and unless you're coming up with these incredible programs and uses, I mean, a much larger context, obviously, and more urban and more challenges in many ways, but I think Sam would probably remember me saying I would not want to be that superintendent, because that's, you know, just imagine the pressure to just, you know, to supplant, and then, like, I don't know what the situation is in New Britain, that superintendent is retiring, but it's, you know, 0.0%. So that's gonna have to go up substantially, and I know they got lots of ESSER and grant money, but, you know, situations like that, it puts you in a really bad place in the long term. You know, it's kinda like, you know, like I said with the debt management, right? You know, trying to keep that steady so you don't have the big spikes and dips. You know, on the town side, they do a good job with that, because you don't want to have big spikes and dips based on debt that's coming in and going off. You keep a steady amount in debt management. So it's the same thing with like a full budget. You really want to keep it as consistent as you can. That's why, you know, Kevin in the capital budget does the technology replacement plan. So I know districts that they were trying to scrape up, you know, millions of dollars to buy all their technology because it all became obsolete at one time. So Kevin has a replacement cycle. You know, it's steady. You know what's coming. You can plan for it and you can budget for it. So it's a really sensible way of doing it, so that you're not having these big dips and peaks and valleys. Sorry for ranting on that. Yes, Lori?
With the bigger schools, is that on?
Just make believe it's karaoke.
Is that on? Okay.
Yeah, it's on.
With the bigger schools, don't they use a lot of that money for security that is not used in a smaller school like here? Is that part of the budget, or is there added monies to their budget for security reasons?
No, every school has security systems. We have pretty robust security systems here too. It's a smaller scale. We have 5 schools. Some cities may have 35 schools. So it's all to scale, you know, obviously. And there's also security grants. We did write a security grant, and we are getting a security grant for a significant amount it's outside of, you know, what's needed in here. It's, you know, for interoperability, communication systems, working with the police department in the schools, and also some security items that aren't part of our budget. But I don't know if I explained that well, but Sam, Steve Bussell, and, you know, we learned, you know, we're going to be getting that grant. So there are grants for security specific to that, but it's all based on scale, and it's based on need. So some communities have a much higher need, socioeconomic need, than others. So it's a combination of those factors that really result in the bigger amounts going to some cities and towns, you know, the alliance districts. That there's a lot of oversight with those monies, though. If you're an alliance district, there's a tremendous amount of oversight and accountability and reporting that has to happen. So we're not in that place because we do well relatively, you know, compared to others like us, and you know, we're not an alliance district. We perform well. We want to do better. We're going to do better, but we're not an alliance district, so we don't get as much money, but we also have other benefits from not being on that list.
I just wanted to point out, I mean, as the board, we are, right, the line that puts this budget together for the students. Then it goes to the council when it's raised or it's lowered, but we're here, we're the last line for the students. And although it would be a budget increase, on the town side, they're also getting grants and revenue. It doesn't mean they don't have, you know, bills. You know, so we still have to keep things going. All of the increase, I mean, 85% of the increase is just staffing. And that's it. It's the basic fundamentals just to make the schools operational every day. And what we don't use goes back to the town. So what we don't use from ESSER, we can't keep. It does go back to them at the end of the year. So we do need to ask for what we need, and I don't feel like there's much extras here, but for what we need, and then we spend it. But if we have extras, it's not like we hold on to it, you know, or it goes into a stash for next year or something somewhere. So it does go back if there were to be, you know, a decreased need.
This is on a completely different subject. Last meeting, we were talking about risk. In the food services, do we have any backstock of supplies? If we were to have, you know, a shortage issue or an unexpected situation like that?
Funny you ask. No, I met with our food service department yesterday, day before, I don't know, time flies. But food shortages is a big issue, and it's expected to continue to be a big issue for the next year. Becky can probably talk to this better than I can, but, you know, that and hiring and sustaining those people, keeping those people in district is those two issues right now are challenging all food service departments. And so, we've been fortunate that we've been able to keep our program going and serve great meals, but it's not without a lot of juggling. There's things they just can't get anymore. And because there's a shortage outside of food service, programs, a lot of the vendors, it's more lucrative for them to stop serving with all the restrictions and difficulties to supply to school food service. They stop those lines and instead put the resources into the lines, the public, and so there's a lot of that happening too. I think it's a challenging time for food service right now.
So we don't have a back stock of any kind? Like, do we have any type of back stock of food? Do we have a supply closet?
Of food?
Yeah, how long would
We have some
you be
canned
able to
goods back
sustain,
there, but-
if you didn't get any more deliveries, how long would the schools be able to stay open?
You know, most school districts right now are holding like 2 weeks' worth of food just because,
Okay,
if
that's
you
what-
can.
Okay.
Because you have to, because you can't rely upon what's coming the next day. One of the things that did happen, the biggest impact on food service, and I don't want us to go down food service for too long, but, all meals are free. All first meals for children, breakfast and lunch, in every school district across the entire country is free. So the amount of kids that we're serving, in some cases, tripled. So at the same time as the pandemic hits and our supplies are a problem and shipping is even a bigger problem, our demand triples. So there's no way, and now next year, we just met today, Ashley was on the call with a bunch of folks who are distributors, and the state was there, USDA, everybody talking about what's gonna happen next year. Well, next year, they could end up with a glut, because now they're getting, prepared, and they think they're getting prepared, and next year, we go back to having to charge, fees for the meals again, and that participation could drop, and then they could end up with having all this food that they produced, and we can't use it, So it's a real roller coaster. Food service is a whole separate, right? And I think somebody mentioned that, self-funded supposedly. However, if it's not self-funded, the district, bails it out. But in a district of this size, we've usually been self-funded and done well enough to be able to, gather a little bit of money up to replace our equipment and stuff like that. But if one district gets into a big bind, another district is gonna reach in and help out. We've been doing that through this whole thing. It's been a ride, so.
Any other questions at all? A lot of really good questions, and it's important that you really understand the budget and how everything works, and
Absolutely.
so this has been good. I don't know if there's any other questions tonight, or if you're at a point where you're saturated, or, I just, as Sam mentioned, just as process, on the 14th, the board really will need to vote on the budget that they can agree on, so, if there's any other questions tonight, I wanted to make sure I address them, and we'll continue to get questions from the public once I send out the link and some budget information, and then we'll share that with the board for your consideration too. And then,
So I'll just tell you that I will support this budget, and, it is a bit of a hard hit, this situation with the health insurance, but this does happen from time to time. It's not something that's optional. We are, keep our fingers crossed that it will come down and it won't, and that would reduce our increase right across the board. This is not without risks. We talked about the potential for, outplacements, which was a big issue this year. And once in my 20 years, we actually did have to go back during the school year to the town council and ask for funding because we had such an unusual situation that occurred within special education. That's usually what happens. We went back, we had to ask for additional funding, the town granted us additional funding. And so that kind of thing does happen from only once, though, in 20 years. So, the potential for substitute costs is big. Inflation is a big one. So there is a lot of risk here, and I don't think we're being overly, I don't think it's exorbitant in any way, shape, or form. And lastly, I'll just say that, this is what I always think about a Board of Education, right? We're a group of citizens who pay taxes and do this only because it's so much fun. We don't get any money, and it's just, it's a blast. But, we do this because we are here to do the right thing for the school district and the children in the school system. There is no one else who will say, yes, raise my taxes, because I think those kids deserve it. There is no one else that knows what we know, that can see what we see, that has, hopefully, the trust and the belief that the school district can do the right thing, and will support this budget. Because if we don't do that, there is nobody else. Every taxpayer will have a question in their head. They'll think that something is being wasted somewhere. It's just what people do. So there's nobody else that will stand up and say, this is an increase in my taxes, but I will take it because I believe in it, because I know it's the right thing for the kids in the community. So join me in going off that mindset.
Yeah, I would like to make a couple of comments. One, I do believe that this is a budget, it's a budget of needs, and that I think is one fact we have to really consider. But even the questions here tonight have clearly indicated, I think, to all of us, that we are kind of sailing in uncharted waters. There are a lot of unknowns that we have to accommodate for, and I think that this budget has done that and is doing that. It is a well-prepared budget, and it has tried to take and to accommodate for the contingencies that might be facing us that we're not really sure of. And tonight is one example where we received very late word of changes in our health insurance, which is very meaningful. The condition in the health industry right now is a situation in flux, so that this increase is something that we have to accommodate for. But this budget and the whole budget process does indicate, at least to me, that there has been very prudent use of the ESSER funding, all three, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, accommodating that into the needs that we have right now and utilizing, bringing our students up to date. I think the report that Dave gave to us Tuesday night clearly indicates that because of the conditions that we are working in, a good number of our students are falling behind where they need to be so that they can continue to really keep in pace with our Portrait of a Graduate, which is a program that really takes our students from pre-K right through 12. And we were working along with this, and along came the pandemic, and it threw us in a little bit of a curve. But I think this budget has accommodated for that, and the prudent use of our ESSER grant fundings. Also, leaving some of those in reserve slightly for contingencies that may come up, and hopefully, history will tell us whether we judge that correctly. But if we look at this overall budget, even with the change in insurance that we received tonight, we are about $88,807 actually over what our contractual needs were. And even with these increases in our budget, we still are maintaining a per-student cost of about $17,963, which is in average of what we have tried to maintain in the 10 years that I've been on this board. It's interesting to note that currently, because the last figures we have showing our per-student costs puts us still where we need to be in all the districts. We're still among one of the lowest, but currently, the last figures we have, we were at 19,000, so this budget is actually, because we've been able to increase the number of students, just to make that not statistically really distorted, that we still are maintaining a per-student cost where we need to try and maintain it, yet we are providing the services for our students and bringing them up to where they need to be at level, and still continuing to have, really, I think, above standard total student services that we're doing. So I am not really pleased with a 3.72% increase, but this is a reality of life, and I think we have to work with that and support that.
I have a question. I can figure out how to put this on. No, but I won't. My fingers aren't working, so I'm sorry. Foster, you said that our children are falling behind, but yet you're saying that we're giving them everything that they need because we do get the ESSER money, so I'm a little bit confused here. How are children falling behind?
That is in the report that Dave gave to us on Tuesday night. If you look at where they are and where they were and then where they are now, and just the percentages, I got it buried in here somewhere, but if you look at that report that Dave gave us on Tuesday night, it does indicate both on the math level and language arts level where our students were by grade level, and where they are falling, falling slightly. There's less of an improvement than there has been in the past. But that is a very well-stated report that, and I don't want to quote it from memory or bore you with going back, but I direct you into that report, because it does. And Dave is a much higher pay grade than I am anyway. So.
All this, we have pockets of real concern within our student achievement. So those are areas we're attacking aggressively with additional staff and, regular assessments to gauge where students are, and really implementing, tier 1 and 2 and tier 3 strategies in some cases, really trying to remediate and get kids back to where they need to be. Every district has these gaps that developed due to COVID. It's not a Plainville issue. We have less of an issue. We were in school more than most of the districts in our DIRG. We're fully in school to a much larger extent than a lot of districts around the state. Some districts were closed the entire year, all remote. It works for some kids. It works terribly for other kids. I have both. I have my own at home. One did great, one did terrible, and my little one does well wherever she is. But so it's different for every kid. So that was the situation. We had some students who were home alone doing their work and playing video games and doing other things that are distracting in their bedroom. So everyone had a different situation. Some families had two parents that had to go to work, so the children were home alone or with an older sibling. So everyone had a different learning situation. So that's where the learning loss came from, the gaps for a lot of students. Some students excelled on fully remote learning, but much lower number. Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, the only other thing I'll add is that's where a lot of our grant funding is going to, is remediation support programs, so that we don't lose more ground than we need to. We want to keep our academic level high, because we were in a great place before the pandemic, and due to the pandemic, like Mr. LePage said, everyone is going to see learning loss. But we want to build that back up as quickly as we can, so it's not extending too long over too many years for these students. We don't want them to lose time academically. So.
so I'll comment next. I support the proposed 3.72% increase in the upcoming budget. I mean, there's a lot of risk in there, but I support it, and so that we can continue the programming, the education, the learning, the growing of our students here in Plainville Community Schools, and that hopefully after these ESSER grants are done, that we don't have that cliff.
So after all these questions, did we want to start over with voting? So that has anybody clarified, the questions? Has that helped? I mean, to the point where anyone wants to support the budget? That said no previously, or? I just want to make sure everybody's questions are answered. I want you to feel comfortable with what you're doing,
It's difficult because my broader scope of questioning really dives into the ESSER funding. And as a board, we don't have any say over that as far as if we're going to receive that money. That's determined. So the board does not vote to receive ESSER funding. Is that correct? We have no say over that. Is that true?
Well, the ESSER funding isn't necessarily, it may be offsetting the budget a little bit, but it's not the actual budget. Am I correct by saying that?
I understand. I guess when you said it wasn't fully approved yet, if we hadn't received it yet, if we're still in the process, and we couldn't imagine any reason not to receive it. I guess my question is, does the board have any say-so whether or not that process is completed or not?
We've applied, it's just there are items that they ask for more information. Again, it's a grant that we can use to really transform and improve our schools and what we do for kids. I don't know of any districts that have turned it down. I don't know the answer to that. Sam, I'm not sure. As a former board member.
No, I would need more information from where you're headed. I'm just not, if you could help me understand what you're really asking, just because I don't think, I'm struggling to understand the scenario.
I've read them several times, and my takeaway, you said it today, transform and also reimagine education. It's difficult for me to buy into that when I haven't been sold on the transformation and reimagination, what happens from here forth. Does that make sense? We're getting a lot of money to execute a very specific plan, and I see the pros in the plan, I do, but I also have concerns. So I guess my question is, tonight we're talking about the budget, just specifically to run the schools. And I want to make sure that I, as a board member, don't have any say-so whether or not that ESSER funds are received or not. Is that correct? Without you needing, my why being irrelevant, that's not something we vote on. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So I guess my hesitation then, so when I'm analyzing and working through is the difference between the budget of keeping the trains running versus the grant funding and what that's going to be utilized for moving forth.
We have
So I'm just
close
still
to $1
thinking.
million of staffing in this budget that are offset by the grant from ESSER grant in order to help students recover and to address the learning gaps that Mrs. Hardy asked about. And that Foster, mentioned in his words. So if we were to remove any grant funding, we've received those grants and we're applying them, but some of them are in the future, obviously. But it would have a pretty significant increase on our budget in order to maintain the same level of services that we now have in place and we're planning for next year. We would have to increase the budget by another $1 million because we wouldn't have that offset through the grants from ESSER that we have in the budget. Plus we have, if you notice on a lot of the budget object lines, it says any additional expenses will be covered by the ESSER grant. We have that in there about 20 times. So we budgeted kind of bare bones, and we're planning to use the ESSER grant to as this kind of the stopgap, so we're not going over a certain amount. So that's how we kept our budget pretty aggressive. So if that helps, I'm not sure what you have in mind that we're planning to do. You're welcome to be in part of the strategic planning process where we really talk about what we mean by some of the ideas to make our schools better using the grant funds. We want the district, the community to be involved, and multiple voices who have different, interests and for what our students will, can possibly achieve and accomplish and have as resources through those grants. So, it'll be very transparent. Everything so far has been staffing, PPE to be in school and open schools and running the buildings. Everything from the orange barriers going all the way down the high school hallway last year, everything had to be purchased and put in place before we could open schools. So everything has a cost. So long story short, it'll be very transparent as far as what the ESSER funds are spent on, and we can obviously report on that to the board as well. But you're welcome to be and invited to be a part of that strategic planning process when we look at ways of possible transformations in a positive way for our kids. Okay.
Thank you, and at our CABE training, they were very, very transparent as to what the transformation and reimagination is going to look like, hence my concern. So I just wanted to be transparent with you. I didn't want you to have to be a mind reader and try to, what is she talking about? But I guess that I would love to be a part of that because that is the piece that has me hesitant.
You're welcome to be in, CABE, whatever CABE, I'm not sure what was said at the CABE training. CABE is a kind of a legal resource for us and workshops for the board and things of that nature, but CABE is not our Plainville Board of Education and school system agenda or anything like that. Yeah.
Just in that note, Rach, I would highly recommend, I know Crystal and I have been through it, there is a leadership program offered by CABE. It does involve, like, we do a lot of free time for the town, but it does involve more of your personal time. But it is an excellent educational program that CABE does have. And Becky is the resident expert on that because she has taken more courses than any of us. But that is how you get your really good sound background knowledge of what our individual responsibilities are as Board of Education members and how we stand. So I would personally really recommend that for you. And either Becky or I or any one of us can give you the contacts at CABE so you can get to Patrice and find out. I don't know really, still with the COVID situation that we're still dealing with, whether those courses are going to be in person as they were. Because not only do you get the education, but you get to network with other board members, which I think is essential in your own personal growth. You get to talk with, and then you really meet and work with these people throughout your career on the board. And it is a good cross-learning opportunity.
I think that's what we went to Foster. Or is that what you were referencing?
No, you went to the new board member orientation.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So, but isn't that what he's talking about?
The leadership would probably be the ones that you attended.
I see.
I had a question, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask Lori, you had mentioned that the budget was too high. Was there an area that you felt was too high?
It's probably just an overall, because if you take a little from here, a little from there, or you add a little here and you add a little there, it'll either reduce it or it'll increase it. I just looked at some of these areas, and it just seems like it's just a little bit too high. And but if I'm the only one that sees it or thinks that, that's just my opinion. But
I mean, your opinion really matters. I'm curious, like, where you think what area should be reduced or where it's too high.
don't have any specific category at this time. I just think, if I looked at it, really close, I could probably find a little here and a little there, and I don't wanna nitpick. But if I'm the only one that thinks it's a little high, then, there's no point of going through that. If more people thought it was, a little bit high, then it would be worth going through it and finding places to save. So, that's kind of where I'm standing right now. If I'm the only one that thinks it's a little too high, then what's the point of going through it?
Okay, I was just asking because I've been going through it kind of nightly since we got it. Like I have columns of where I think there's risks, anything, that I thought could be considered extra. So I was just curious what your takes are, because we've had it for a little bit.
Lori, today, when we, the time that we've spent going line item and discussing each one, I think that what I got from you, the SR, that offset here, offset there, and when we sat and tried to calculate what that would look like over the course of the year, that could add up. So I think it's the little things that add up that I took away was your concern today. And I guess that's what led to my concern and my fundamental question of if we can offset with ESSER here, ESSER there, as buffers, I guess why weren't we just, fill in the hole. But I was able to get that answer here tonight as well. I don't know, if we're talking it out, I just wanted to.
It's pretty much right on. It's, I just think it's an expensive budget, and I was looking at places where I thought it might be a little bit higher than it needed to be. But if I'm the only one that thinks that, then there's no point of going through it, so.
I think we all agree that the areas where it's high, we keep saying is beyond our control, health insurance costs, energy costs, and inflation, unfortunately a sign of our current circumstances, all three driving the increases.
We don't have, just a full transparency, we don't have inflation built into it at all. Inflation doesn't affect a lot of the budget lines because we negotiate contracts. It will impact future negotiations because the cost of goods and services will be higher, and so there'll be an argument for a higher wage. But we have those two smaller groups that are negotiating for next year anyway. Sorry.
I have a question. When you say we're getting grants from the state, are those grants funded by taxpayer dollars?
Well, any money from the government
Exactly.
ultimately comes from
So.
somewhere, so
Even
it comes from
if it's
taxes.
coming from the government, it's still worth looking into as far as saving. It comes down to saving taxpayers their, the money that we're using, we've got to use in the right way.
But if we're eligible for grants and we don't use them, it won't decrease taxes. It would go somewhere else. Yeah. Someone else would get the funding. I know what you're saying, though. Money doesn't grow on trees, the old adage, but.
It's true.
And Lori, this is what I mean when I say this is the Board of Education, right? So our goal is to do the best we can for the kids and for the school district. And there's nobody else that has that lens, nobody else that has that job. There are a lot of people with the lens and who want the job of reducing taxes, reducing costs, everything else. But if everybody has that lens, there's nobody to protect school districts and ultimately children.
I'd like to
So,
do both.
that's, and there's absolutely, that's what we're doing. We're taxpayers. We're unpaid volunteer taxpayers. And, that's what we're doing here. We're trying to get the right thing for kids. We're not going overboard, because why would we want to waste our own money? But we also have to take advantage of the things that are offered.
I don't disagree with that at all.
And that's my philosophy as a superintendent. I think hopefully the board members who've been here for a while know me by now. I ask for what I believe we need. I don't ask for more than I believe we need. I think we use grants wisely to offset some of the expenses. We plan for strong programs for our kids and services and staff that we need, but you know, from day one, I've said I want to give you a budget that you can support, that you don't have to feel like you need to cut it because it's a really reckless budget. You know, I bring forward a budget that I believe is reasonable, covers all the costs in order to continue having strong schools in Plainville. So that's my responsibility, and that's my particular, you know, belief set. You know, I think that our kids have a really incredible school district, you know, and people who come here to work here from others. We just had a meeting today for the administrative mini summit with about a large number of individuals, and some of them have come to us from other districts, and they were all saying what a great place Plainville is, and they're very fortunate to work here because, you know, we have tremendous schools and resources, and our terrific kids. That's right. Dave came. Mr. Lewandowski came to us from Meriden after what, 20 years, Dave? So it's a great place to be, but that's by design and it's by investment. This community has invested in education and continues to support education. You know, generally speaking, parents are happy with our system and services and are proud of what our kids are doing. So we want to keep that going. So my budget represents allowing us to do the things that we do well and doing even more of that and doing an even better job of that.
I just wanted to ask a question to clarify, and just make sure that it's really clear. ESSER has no impact on curriculum or nothing that has to be taught or anything like that, correct?
Correct. The only thing that impacts our curriculum are state policies, statutes that require any changes in courses that we have to offer, things of that nature, but it has no bearing on grants. Grants are based on our socioeconomic status, and every district has there's a formula that goes into that determines how much you get for Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, and then an IDEA grant is related to special education, and then ESSER grants are related based on need, similar formula to Title I, I believe. So that's how the grants are determined, and you're not, yes, Ms. Martinez, to answer your question without so many words, it's not related at all. I don't have that ability to use few words. It is my issue. Yes, I have issues. All right. Any other questions before? I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to do tonight. I know you were.
I'd just like to take a 5-minute recess if we could.
Sure.
Thanks. That's my blood sugar's dropping. I would like to go around the room one more time. That's just my personal opinion. As a chair, I just want a clear cut yes or no at this time. I absolutely understand if people need more time, that's okay. I feel like when I've asked and called the names, you know, it's okay to explain your view via yes or no. But I just have to fill this paper out for Joan. So if we can just get a clear yes or no, I will read the names off. Mrs. Buchanan. Ms. Clark's not here. Mrs. Hardy. Mrs. Martinez. Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. St. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mrs. Tyrell.
Yes.
Mr. White. Okay, so I guess I'm the last to vote, and I'm going to say yes as a 3.72 increase. I do feel that this is a very conservative budget. I've listened to the past 3 meetings, and I feel that our superintendent, as well as our vice superintendent and Sam, they've worked very hard the past year going over all this, dotting their I's, crossing their T's. I really don't feel that any of our questions have gone unanswered. They've been very transparent and very concise as to what these expenditures are used for. As a parent, as a taxpayer, we need to take care of these kids. Our kids are falling behind due to COVID. COVID has made a huge impact on their learning, on staying at home. My 3rd grader, although she was at home, it was very tough to teach her. And she's definitely behind. She's getting better, but she's just one of all these hundreds of students. I think that as the years go on, everything's going to increase. We're seeing our groceries increase. We're seeing our our gas. Taxes are a part of that. I am very conservative, and I feel that the bare minimum, you know, we don't need extra fluff. We don't need all the extras, and I'm very conservative as well, so I guess it's a little bit difficult for me. But I feel that Steve has presented a very, very conservative budget. And I think that we, as a board, should support it. And if you don't, that's okay, because everybody is entitled. But I think all of our questions were answered, and at least I do, and as you know, many of you have voiced, once your questions were explained, you felt okay with it. I do understand where Rachel stands, because the whole ESSER funding, it's confusing. So that's all I have to say, is I feel that this budget should pass. And it should go to town council as this. So, unless anyone has any other questions or any other statements, I can call for a motion to adjourn.
So just one thing, you know, when you bring a budget to the town council, first of all, this is like stage 1, really. I mean, it's
Right.
multiple stages, but it's stage 1, okay? This budget is going to go to the town council, who will most likely reduce it. And then it's going to go to get voted on, which could also get further reduced. And we could be back here in a couple of months determining how we would cut it to go out for another vote. When a budget moves forward without the support especially like, when it looks lopsided party-wise, that doesn't bode well for the budget going through the town council or through the vote. So if you're just uncertain in the next couple of days or whatever, we could have another meeting if we had to. If people had questions, if there's
Absolutely.
anything that can be done that can get people to have a better understanding or feel more comfortable with the budget to be able to vote for it, that would be great, because when it goes through like this, it makes the budget more vulnerable to not being passed. So just consider that if you have questions or anything that, can be done to help you clarify what it is you're concerned about.
I just have a quick question. Don't we have a meeting on the books for 2/1? We don't traditionally use that last meeting, but we do
We
have
do.
it.
We have, that date is held in case we need it, and we do have scheduled with Nick Caruso from CAPE to come in and do some board development work.
Okay.
When the board met in the last workshop meeting, you indicated that you might want to do the lighthouse,
Oh, great, okay.
and so he was going to explain that, and also, I'm not sure if it's too much, but he could also pick up with the code of conduct
Code
that
of
you were
conduct.
working on,
Right,
that
code
we
of ethics,
didn't
yeah.
get through. And so he was going to pick up there with you on the 1st, but we told him that it was a placeholder, because this would take, the budget would take precedent. It's only if you didn't feel you needed it for the budget.
And I guess we would only need that date if, like, more clarification was needed, right? Or questions answered.
Right.
I mean, I would say that the superintendent put out a budget that he felt that every board member could get behind. I don't think he would have put this out if he didn't feel like, it was not too far to any direction. And so, if there is some opportunity to have every board member behind this budget, this would be a great time to talk about that. And, if it's a reduction in programs, what programs would be reduced? If it's a feeling that there is something that's not valued, properly, where did we misvalue it? But, this would be the opportunity to do that so that everybody could then get behind the budget. But if there's no way that you're gonna get behind the budget no matter what, then, I guess then there's no sense having another meeting.
Right.
I just have a quick question. With the, oh my God, I can't even think right now. With the percentage we have right now, will there be a mill rate increase, or how would we know that? When would we know that?
Not until the town.
Based on just us, just on our monies?
Yeah, we won't know until the town factors that into that balance sheet that you see. We're line 2 of that, and there's a lot of other things that go into that, along with their budget and debt service and revenues, and, so that's all factored in.
I mean, it's very low. I
so-
don't think there was last time, the way our budget was.
No, the mill rate,
Oh, I see.
Grant list has increased, so the mill rate is going to change. It does every 5 years. Used to be every 10 years, that's not valid. But the grant list in Plainville has substantially increased, both with residential and commercial property. But then everyone this summer did receive the new valuation for their property.
Right.
And so that, they also had time to go to the Board of Assessment Appeals. For not turning out. They had a chance to go to the Board of Assessment Appeals and appeal that. I believe that has passed, that particular time frame. But, so that, the mill rate at all events will be lower this year, but your taxes probably will slightly increase because your property did increase over the last 5 years. Anyone who owns real property. And that also goes with motor vehicles, that's also revalued at the same time.
Right.
I mean, I think your question is a little bit crystal ball, but if we could just set aside the revaluation for a minute and just look at the fundamentals of the town, the town's in good, I could see that if it wasn't for the revaluation, just in a typical year, I could see it being another year like last year where the mill rate either stayed the same or even went down slightly, because Our ECS grant, which is the biggest grant that comes into the town other than ESSER, is going up by almost $200,000 because of a phase-in. The grand list is going up because of new taxpayers coming online. There's other revenues that are increasing. So there's a lot of favorable things happening in the budget. Of course, we don't know until the town council goes through their process. But, you know, and the other thing is the unassigned fund balance. You know, the $1.7 million that now has been added into that unassigned fund balance, it's an opportunity to help fund this year. So there's a lot of fundamentally good things in this town to be able to support, you know, the expenditure budget.
I do not support this budget. I want to make that clear. I know we vote on it on the 14th. I know you're trying to get an idea in here. I have gone through it many times and taken this very seriously, and just need more time. So it's not a hard no. It will most likely ultimately be a yes. I just need to go back through it again, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions and be transparent like this. This has been incredibly helpful. If we have a placeholder on the 1st for another meeting, or have intentions of having a meeting on that day for education, if between now and then we do decide that we do need another meeting for this topic, could it be combined? Could we have an hour of that meeting be for this if need be, and then an hour for our education? And if not, use it for what it was intended for?
That's what I was thinking, you know, depending how much, I would recommend any questions still come in. You can still use that form to submit questions, and, you know, based on that, we can determine whether or not we're gonna need the whole meeting for further deliberation, or if we can have a kind of split meeting where Mr. Caruso comes in and uses part of the time, and then he may only need another half hour to just talk about some outlying, you know, issues or concerns. But if you decide you need more time, we could just commit the whole meeting to the budget too.
That would be really great, because I'm also thinking of Mrs. Clark, who had an emergency this evening, just, you know, to make sure that she's fully up to speed as well.
Thank you. Yep, exactly.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting
Thank you.
adjourned.